Welcome everybody to our session on Connect and how to stay safe and compliant. My name is Chrissy Hayes. I am the Director of Learning Development here at Avetta, and I am just thrilled to be here with you guys today. I've also got Chris Alexander with us, who is our Director of Product, and we, along with Justin, are going to take you through the compliance process, including the verification, the variance, and the annual review process. So a lot to get through in the next few minutes. I want to remind everybody, if you've got questions, make sure you utilize the Twitch stream. We will do our best to leave as much time at the end for Q&A, as we really want this to be interactive and ensure that you have enough time to get those questions answered to ensure that you're staying compliant and able to go on site. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So if you have not been into our product is what's called Connect, or the Connect platform. Within the Connect platform, you will have what's called a compliance status based on what you have done within the system to determine whether or not you are quote unquote compliant to be able to work on an Amazon site. There are 3 compliance statuses that you need to be aware of. We've got green, which obviously, just like any other green, pass, go, collect $200, means you're fully compliant to work on an Amazon site, okay? There's 2 other compliances that you need to be aware of. There's orange, or amber, as you might hear it, and red. Orange, amber, whatever color you want to call it, this means you are conditionally compliant to work on an Amazon site. And there's a couple of reasons that you may be in a orange status. One of those is that you may have some items that may mean that you were at risk of falling out of compliance, okay? With an orange, Amazon can issue a PO. However, they want you to be aware that actions could cause you to fall out of compliance. So that's a cautionary tale. Ensure that you're going into the Connect platform and taking a look at what you need to do to ensure that you stay in a compliance status, okay? Another reason that you could be in orange is for safety stats, all right? If your safety exemption is rejected for whatever reason, you would then go into a red status. But again, safety stats is another reason that you may be in an orange status. And again, we highly recommend that if you see yourself in that orange status, that you go into the Connect platform and take a look at why. The last one obviously is red, not allowed to work on an Amazon site, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You will not be issued a PO in order to go on site. So when you log into the Connect platform, again, you will see right away what status you are in. We recommend that you ensure you are doing your due diligence to ensure that you are staying in a compliance status, whether that be green or cautionary orange, to ensure that you can get those POs issued and that you can go on site, okay? So we're going to talk about the Avetta verification process, and I'm going to turn that over to my colleague, Chris Alexander, who's going to take you through how to actually verify, again, and stay in that compliance status. Go ahead, Chris. Oh, Chris, I think you're muted.
All right, I'm going to switch screens real quick and just share something. All right, so this is Connect right here, and she was just showing earlier that your compliance status when you first log in is here located at the top left. We call this the donut, just in case you guys ever want to know that. And all of these are clickable here. So if you have multiple connections, you can easily click on these and be able to drive into those details to see how you're standing with those particular connections. So from a verification process, right now you're seeing some of the tasks that are assigned to you. And then from there, you can dive into all of your tasks. So in this scenario, we've got 18 of them, which include things from your standard pre-qualification forms to insurance, as well as a few other things like our annual update that happens at the first 90 days of every year. So what does some of these look like? Let's dive into a variance request form. So what's really nice about these, I'll back up just one step here. You can tell, it tells you here that you need to complete the form, or some other statuses, such as maybe it's pending a review or input, or perhaps maybe it was sent in like this scenario and it was rejected, so meaning there's something that needs to change. So if we drive into this, here is the an Amazon request form. They ask you a few questions, and it's pretty simple of just ticking the box and answering the questions of that fall in there. And you can see as I do that, a progress bar starts to complete, as well as it asks you a couple other additional questions. So these are sort of a growing form. So now I can jump in and see for TRIR what other details I might need to fill out or other files I might need to attach. So one thing I'll just take note on this particular and our system as a whole, we autosave everything as you kind of work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we submit things. So the one thing to definitely be conscientious of is that even though you might be complete, you still got to click the submit button when you're done. So right now we can see that it's not done yet, but this will turn green when it is actually complete. And that way you can submit and send this in to verification across the board. All right, so I'm going to back up one more here just to this item where we showed where there was a rejection. And one of the things to take note here, we do show you what you were rejected for, whichever item was really just sent back for review. And on the side here, specifically for insurance, we show you what details to take note of and what items might need to change. So that way you can know exactly how you need to fix this and get it corrected quickly. That way you can maintain that compliance status across the board. So I'm going to pause here and just kind of turn it over to Justin a little bit and just talk about the variance process and just the path that you guys kind of take and that they operate, ask you guys to complete across the, here at Amazon.
All right. So Chris mentioned different tasks that you will be assigned based on, and I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, next slide. Chris talked about the different tasks that you get assigned once you register and you enroll into a beta. You're dropping in your liability information, your policies, procedures, and all those things are rated and measured against not only regulatory requirements, but Amazon's minimum safety requirements. With that being said, when you're updating your performance data when you're updating different tasks within the system and you're inputting your performance data, there are key metrics that Amazon takes a snapshot of and are critical, right? So when we look at all the information that you submit, and if there's a flag associated with any serious or willful OSHA violations, if you have an elevated total recordable injury rate, if you have a fatality, these are considered like our critical safety performance indicators. And when you are flagged there because you're out of tolerance from the Amazon minimum standards, you're going to be issued a new task, which is called a variance request. Each variance request will come across just like any other task in Connect, and you'll see it there waiting for your response. In that variance request, what we're asking for is we identify that you have a gap performance-wise, whether it's a fatality, whether it's an elevated TRI or whatever, and we want to know what caused that gap, what caused the fatality, what caused the elevated TRIR, what trends or whatever, what kind of incident trends have you been seeing at your facility, and then also an action plan. What are you doing to combat that, right? Because what it comes down to is we want to be sure that if we're inviting you into our building to perform, that we won't see a reoccurrence of whatever those performance gaps are. We don't want to see a reoccurrence at an Amazon facility. And so we want to have a really clear picture about how you can contain and correct those potential hazards or whatever's causing your gap. Variances are reviewed by us, by Amazon, not Avetta. Avetta is just collecting the data for us. What happens is that when you guys come to request, our team, which is myself, Amy Hayatala, that you guys met earlier, and Nesta Benavetta, as we go through each of them and we start to look at the quality of the request feedback, does it give us enough information? Does it actually address the root cause that was identified? And then what happens from there is we have to scrub it to make sure it's suitable. But after that, once it's at a certain point where it's presentable, we're able to go to our senior WHS leaders, our legal counsel, and also our operations and procurement leadership. And weekly, we take a batch of these variance requests and we review them with this team. And so we're looking at it from a safety standpoint of, from your variance requests. at least, and I'm gonna give you inside track because I'm looking at these variance requests. I'm looking at that root cause, right? I want to know, are there underlying things? And what I mean by that is I've seen a variance request where they said our TRIR is high because we just had a lot of ergonomic injuries last year. That doesn't really tell me much, but do you know what caused your ergonomic injuries? Were they caused by lifting and tools in and out of a work van? Is it from slipping from ladders? Is it from manual material handling? What's the trend, right? We had one, I remember, where they said we had a bunch of lacerations. So in my head as a safety person, the lacerations, was it to the arm? Was it to the hand? Whatever. What steps, what did you identify as the cause? Was it lack of PPE? Is it a specific piece of equipment? Tell me those trends, right? And when you have those trends, you're able to give me a really detailed root cause, meaning, did you go through the process of really breaking the problem down and identifying a systemic issue that's driving your gap? Too many times we do see a lot of the root causes focusing on the person and not the process, meaning we had a rash of injuries because people just failed to wear their PPE, right? So for me, as a safety professional and working in safety management these years, that's not a question that I would necessarily put on a person. My question would be, well, why does your group feel that it's okay not to wear the PPE? What auditing process do you have in place? What kind of PPE availability or procurement processes do you have in place that have failed? So it goes beyond just blaming the person. We need to look at it systemically, and that's the kind of feedback we're looking for when we're looking at what the root cause should contain. Can you click the next one? Yeah, there you go. All right. And then after you give us the root cause, what's your action plan? It's one thing to say, we increased training. Well, you were supposed to be training anyway, right? That's not the action plan. We bought more PPE. I've seen a lot of them where they say, we hired a safety guy, period. That's going to fix everything, right? I wish that was the case because I'd be rich. But the action plan needs to address the root causes that you identified, right? Putting in there, we just updated our policy. Well, you had a policy in place and it wasn't addressing it. That's not necessarily attacking the root cause. What we look at are the controls that you put in place to address the root cause. And if you're familiar with safety management, you know that the absolute best thing you can do when you have a hazard or a risk is to eliminate it altogether. Can you get that hazard out of your process? If that's not, if you don't have that ability, can you substitute what's causing the hazard? Can you modify a process? And as you go down, the least effective but still control methods. Do you have an administrative control you can put in place? Is there a change in PPE you can put in place? Whatever it may be, it needs to correspond directly to that root cause that drove your performance gap. And so we really look at the quality of the input, how deep you dove into the issue, and what kind of factors that you were able to drive or bring to the surface, and then what action plans you were able to put in place to drive that hazard out of your processes. Next, I'm going to go into annual updates. So the variance request is something that we would get as a result of a lot of times, either upon your initial registration when you're updating your safety performance information, but also it's driven by your annual updates. Annual updates, at least from my experience, this is one gap that we see a lot of people who get flagged or get stopped from performing work is because their accounts are, conditional because they haven't completed an annual update. The annual update period gives you the opportunity to update your previous year performance data for the past year. So coming up in January 2021, you will provide data for all of 2020, right? And the system gives you 90 days. You have to January 1st to March 31st to complete this update. Once you're enrolled and you're all registered already, this annual update is a really small task to complete. However, we see a lot of people who don't use this. And as we move into 2021, if those annual updates aren't complete, this will start pushing you into a non-compliant area. So it's very critical that you update this information and make sure it's up to date by that cutoff date, because we're going to have a hard stop at that 90 days. 90 days is a long time to plug in a few numbers. One thing, and I'm going to just be frank with you, one thing that I look at when we see incomplete annual updates, it tells me something about the robustness of a company's safety program. because we should be tracking that. That should be data that you're looking at throughout the year. So to plug it in January 1st should not be a big deal. So if you're not doing it, it makes me think, what else aren't they doing from a safety management standpoint? So really big opportunity to just stay in compliance, but also allows us to get the visibility we need and help you maintain compliance while you're on Amazon sites. With that, I'm going to hand this back over to Chrissy.
Perfect. Thanks, Justin. I just wanted to quickly recap what we've talked about today and ensure that we get your questions answered. So as a reminder, compliance is the critical key here to ensure that you are able to go on site and do the work necessary on an Amazon site, whether that be, at a site, any site that you work at, regardless of what type of work that you are doing. As a reminder, that green is golden, right? Green is the compliance status that you are looking for. So if you are not in a green status, we recommend that you pop into the Avetta platform and determine why. Chris took us through the verification process and what that looks like to ensure that you stay in a green status. Remember that verification status, those questions that you're going to be answering, that's the data that we utilize based on what Amazon gave us to determine that, yep, you are compliant, you meet Amazon requirements, you have everything you need in place. So when you log in, take a look at those verification requirements, those questions that you need to answer, and make sure that you are submitting those questions. This is a step that a lot of people sometimes forget. They go through the process, they answer all the questions, they sometimes don't actually submit. We also talked about the variance process. Justin took us through that and what that looks like. The variance is what happens when Amazon needs to issue a variance because you are not in a green compliance status or a status that enables them to issue a PO. So for whatever reason, a variance needs to be put in place. Again, what happens is that through that variance process, we collect the data. Amazon then takes a look at it to determine, yep, this does in fact require a variance for whatever reason. And just like Justin says, they want to actually see why that variance needs to be put in place. Why are we having to issue a variance in the first place? Why are you just not in a green status altogether, right? So ensure that that root cause is identified. You've not just issued some additional PPEs. You've not just hired a safety person, to Justin's point. You've actually identified what the reason is. That variance is taken into account. Amazon issues that, and you are able to go on site, okay? The last thing that we talked about here is that annual update. That annual update process happens every year. It's coming up in January. And this is the time of year that we recollect all that data that we've already collected to ensure that the previous year of data still meets the Amazon requirements. So I would highly recommend, as we kind of ramp down through the end of the year, you start gathering that data. It's the same data that we asked the first time you got in the Avetta system. Your safety stats, TRIR, whatever data that we originally collected. Again, you're going to go through that process of submitting your previous year's data through that annual update. To Justin's point, you've got 90 days to do so. If you do not enter that data within those 90 days, you will fall out of compliance within the Avetta product, and you will not be able to go on site or have a PO issued. So again, that's the nuts and bolts of compliance. Honestly, at the end of the day, three main things. Check the Avetta platform frequently, ensure that you are compliant. If you are non-compliant or you're at risk of falling out of compliance, you're in an orange status, you go in and you take a look at those verification requirements to determine why. And if there is a variance required, ensure that you are working with Amazon to determine that you've got a process or a plan in place to ensure that you can, in fact, get back to a green status without that variance. Okay? So I appreciate everybody joining us. Again, we've got plenty of time for the Q&A here. So I believe that Joseph was going to moderate our Q&A session for us. Thanks for popping on.
Hey guys, my name is Joseph. I'm a multi-site safety manager here with Amazon, and I'll be fielding your questions today. So I'm going to start at the top of the chat with the first question we have here. So the question is, what if the fatality was unavoidable? It was a traffic accident where their driver was not at fault. How do they get compliant with this type of incident?
Thank you, Joseph. What I would say is this. So we look at each variance request in each circumstance on a case-by-case basis. So we don't do a broad brush to say fatality, they're done. It's not like that. We look at the circumstances behind it, and because we definitely look at the circumstances behind it because we need to know the applicability to the scope of work you're going to perform for us. In the last year, from variance requests that I've come across or that I've been involved with, we've had some to that point that had something to do with a fatality, a vehicle accident, a no-fault vehicle accident. Unfortunate circumstance that happened, can't hold that against you, right? Like, you don't do any driving for us, you don't do any vehicle movement, we're not paying you to do that. This was an electrician, so but they did have the flip side to that. What I will say is that they did have a solid root cause. As you know, it's not something that that it was the employee's fault, but they had a solid corrective action, and they saw a very deep dive of their driver safety program where they implemented telematics, some kind of Smith driving safety programs, and different things that they implemented, which was a really good look to see that we have a problem, maybe not necessarily our fault, but we're going to do what we can to address the potential risk, right? So it was really good to see that. But any other variance request or a situation that comes up, we look at it on a case-by-case basis. So we won't ever just look at it and say, fatality, you're done. We won't do that. Hope that answered your question.
All right, cool. So the next question is going to be, do we ask our Amazon contact to send us a variance request through Avetta?
No. What happens is this: as we go through, we constantly are managing and analyzing our roster of suppliers that are in Avetta and looking at what we call it is our contractor help, right? And Chris showed you that donut. And we look at that donut to say how many are red, how many are conditional, and we look to find out what's driving those statuses in the system. And when we identify that, okay, this group of people are flagged for these particular flags, whether it's TRIR, fatalities, or citations, we pull those out, and then we issue the request in the system. So it's really key that you look out for those Avetta emails. I know you get system-generated emails that tell you, hey, you have an open task. Really look out for those, because what I've seen in the past is we've issued those requests and they kind of fall on deaf ears and they never addressed. And then that forces us to have to push the non-compliance. If you log into your profile in your Avetta account, you'll see under My Tasks, there will be something that says variance request. And typically we title the variance request whatever the performance gap that needs to be addressed. So it'll say variance request dash TRIR overage, variance request dash fatality. And you would just click into that task and it'll give you prompts to every field that you need to complete and any attachments that you want to supply as supporting documentation. So it's nothing you have to do on your end, nothing your POC, your procurement POC has to do. We monitor and manage our compliance information, and we issue those variance requests based on that data.
Cool. So the next question is kind of piggyback on that one. I believe you answered a little bit of at the end. It's where do I go to perform the action of uploading our paperwork explaining those preventative measures?
Yep, that's a part of your task. So when you get that task in Avetta, which is the variance request, as soon as you click it open, it'll have these different prompts. Here, put your root cause, and it'll give you guidance. We put in there guidance kind of language to give you a blurb that says a root cause should address systemic issues, not the person, yada, yada, yada. And then below there, you'll see different fields with little paper clips where you can upload documents that are supporting documents related to your variance request. So it's all in that one form. Is that right? Avetta team? All right.
That's right.
All right.
So the next question is, how are Avetta requirements applied to international companies? For example, Cornet is based in Israel and conducts business in over 100 countries. Can you limit the Avetta scope to the USA?
Good question. You want me to? I have an idea. All right, I can answer. So listen. So from a U.S. standpoint, so look, the way Amazon is set up in Avetta is that we have different what we call hierarchies, and depending on what connection you are, if you're an Amazon U.S. connection, it's automatically going to register that you're connected to the U.S. Here's your list of requirements you need to complete. If it's Canadian sites that you're connected to, right? So you would team with whoever your procurement person or your point of contact with Amazon and say, hey, I need to go to YYZ1, which is in Canada. As soon as you're connected to that site, a whole different list, or not a whole different list, but additional items related to Canadian requirements will pop up in your taskbar, and then you would need to complete those. We're now in the process, and I'm familiar with Coordinate because we just had some stuff going on a couple weeks ago. We teamed together on. When you start to see us in the overseas or in the international lane, because right now we're launching EU, UK, Australia. We're going to be moving into India soon and Japan. When you start connecting to those different geographies within Avetta, you'll automatically get prompted of, here's some additional items you need to address. So you won't have to do any kind of like asking or anything, but you will need to monitor your account. That's going to be the key. I want to really emphasize right now. I feel like that we really do not have that monitoring of that account that's necessary to maintain compliance. A lot of times people are enrolling, dropping a couple of documents in, and probably not touching anything again until we call it out. You need to actively manage your Avetta account.
Yeah, just following up with Justin there, absolutely correct. Once you connect to the site, you will get site-specific requirements. But one of the questions we get a lot is if there is a Amazon introduction course, for example, that you have to take regardless of the site. If they've taken that once already and then they connect to a separate site, that requirement is already done regardless, right? If that requirement would span multiple sites. So you're not having to do Amazon level requirements at each individual site. The only thing you have to do at the site level is what we call site requirements. To Justin's point, you will have Canada specific, you'll have Mexico specific, APAC specific requirements, but then you've got Amazon level, site level. So that's how it's split up in the system. And Justin, you answered that perfectly.
All right, so jumping into that next question. So this one says, some of my subcontractors have been forced compliant. The note says that the CRM team is prioritizing contractors with fatalities or OSHA violations in 2020. TRIR and EMR will be added to the review cycle in 2021. Will you be forcing all vendors compliant that meet this criteria?
So I want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly. So, because it's totally different from what I know we manage, right? So the first part of the question said that we're prioritizing subs and forcing compliance of those subs.
Yes.
Give me that first half again, please.
So it says some of my subs have been forced compliant. The note says that the CRM team is prioritizing contractors with fatalities or OSHA violations in 2020.
No, so we're prioritizing all of them, right? But we do rank and stack them. So when we look at that, our contractor health, right? When we're evaluating that, we're looking at our donut. Yeah, we're emphasizing on, we have an X amount that are green. We don't need to talk to them right now. We have these red ones. What's driving their red status? And yes, if it's a fatality, and again, if we're looking at a fatality or serious or willful violations, things like that, the review might push you to the top of the list because that's considered some high risk stuff, right? Like something happened there. We are not forcing compliance of, you know what I'm thinking you may be talking about when you say force compliance of subs. There's a nuance in the system that if you're a GC or if you're the direct contractor and you have subcontractors that, again, they have to be enrolled in Avetta and meet the minimum requirements. But there is one requirement that's a little fuzzy when it comes to GC and subcontractor relationships, and that's the liability, general liability. If your subcontractor is only working through you to service Amazon, your insurance will cover that subcontractor. Because of that, we may get a request to say, hey, this is a sub, not a direct. Can you adjust their general liability? Because depending on how you were connected, you may get prompted to do that that general liability piece, and it may not apply because of the relationship. That's the only time we're actually forcing compliance in that sense. We have done some movement of flags based on annual updates, because again, when you register, if you're new and you register, we do give you a grace period to try to update all your information, similar to that update window of January 1st, that 90-day window we talked about for annual updates. So we do grant, some help there. We may push you over if you're brand new, enrolled, and you have X amount of days to complete the annual update. Because right now, if you don't do the annual update, it will automatically make you non-compliant. So we do have wiggle there at times, but we will not, and I can personally tell you, we're not pushing, exempt. We're not doing it willy-nilly. It really is on a case-by-case basis. So I wouldn't, bet on that that's going to happen for you at all times. I would just drive to get my account totally compliant. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I was kind of all over the place.
All right, so we did hit 3:30 East Coast time. So I think it's 12:30 East Coast time. So that is the cutoff point for questions. I'll pass it back to wrap us up.
Yep, Joseph, one more question, because I just saw it pop up at the bottom from T. Perry. I just want to make sure I answer this, because this is one of those questions that I just want to answer. Do third-tier subcontractors need to be Avetta compliant? Yes. All your if they're coming on the site and they're going to turn a wrench, if I'm Justin Smith's Plumbing and I hire Joseph Matthews Plumbing and I subcontract out to Joseph and he subs out to Chrissy needs to be in the system, Joseph needs to be in the system, and I need to be in the system. So if anybody's operating any equipment or doing any kind of high risk activity on the site, that company needs to be in the system. No problem. All right. That concludes our staying compliant breakout session. Hey, really appreciate everybody's involvement and being engaged and interacting in the chat stream. Thank you for joining the entire summit. This is our first one. I'm looking forward to the next one. I think we're going to be bigger and better next year. Avetta team, thank you for your participation. Thank you for helping us all the way through this. Joseph, thank you for jumping in and moderating the chat room. Appreciate that. And look forward to working with everybody. Have a safe day, and we'll see you again next year.